James, a young man with Down syndrome, was trying to stay calm on his first day at work in a local market. However, a customer began ruthlessly belittling and insulting him. While everyone around him stood by and silently watched, a Hollywood star was witnessing the situation. That moment would change James's life and the lives of those around him. Inspired by a true story, can you guess what happened next in this dramatic moment? Before we continue with this story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another special story for you. James, a young man with Down syndrome, was excited to start his first day at work. Everything was new to him. Walking around the market, organizing products, interacting with customers. But something unexpected happened. A woman, moving quickly, headed toward the checkout. She had an expression of anger and impatience on her face. At that moment, James was working at the counter, carefully bagging the customer's groceries. But when the woman saw James, she suddenly stopped, and her gaze turned sharply toward him. "Really, you're here and you can't be this slow." The woman's voice was loud and mocking. "How long is this going to take? There are other people. I can't waste time with someone like you." James looked into the woman's eyes, but he couldn't say anything. Fear was visible in his eyes, but he remained patient. Every move he made seemed to turn into more mockery in the woman's eyes. Meanwhile, the other customers around them turned their heads and silently stood by, no one intervening. And just then, a voice was heard. A man, pushing his way through the crowd, approached. Yes, the famous Hollywood actor Keanu Reeves. Keanu Reeves stepped forward through the crowd, walking calmly but decisively toward the woman. As she noticed his approaching steps, she looked up, pausing for a brief moment. Keanu stopped, locking eyes with her, and said, "Slow down. This young man is just doing his job. You have no right to judge his pace." His tone was firm, yet it was filled with power, respect, and determination. The woman was stunned by Keanu's unexpected intervention. As her eyes fixed on him, it became evident how powerful and impactful his words were. She tried to defend herself for a second, but Keanu's stance was so righteous and dignified that she couldn't find the words to reply. Keanu, without raising his voice any further, took a deep breath and continued. "We are all human. Be patient. We must respect one another." The woman, affected by Keanu's words, took a few steps back. I'm just in a hurry," she mumbled before falling silent. Keanu continued to look at her respectfully. "You may need to hurry, but belittling someone else's patience and effort is never right," he added with a final message. The woman, now angry but much quieter, walked toward the store's exit. Keanu took a deep breath and turned back to James. James's eyes were still filled with a mix of fear and astonishment. Keanu gave him a reassuring smile and said, "You're doing a great job, James. Stay calm. Everything's fine." James, comforted by Keanu's reassuring gaze and encouraging words, felt a little more at ease. The people around them, after the woman's departure, quietly exchanged glances, feeling the weight of the situation. Keanu's intervention was not only a response to the woman's insults, but also a reminder to society about the importance of mutual respect. With Keanu's support, James continued to work with more confidence. The store quickly became a more peaceful place, as the atmosphere had shifted, leaving behind the tension. Keanu, standing in the middle of the store, watched James while the crowd slowly began to settle back into normalcy. The customers around them showed more support to James, some of them smiling warmly and working with a newfound understanding, an understanding ignited by Keanu's courage. This moment didn't just change James's day, it was also a powerful reminder for everyone present on how humans should show respect for one another. James felt even more at ease after Keanu's intervention, but there were still traces of tension in his body. The other customers could feel the change in the atmosphere of the store, quietly glancing at each other. Keanu, standing next to James, gave him even more confidence. His eyes were still focused on the woman who had just exited the store, following her every move. Keanu felt a growing sense of calm inside him, knowing he had done the right thing. As the woman headed towards the store's exit, the people around her gathered together, forming a small group. One customer, who had been silent up until then, walked towards Keanu. "Keanu, that was really an amazing move," he said, gratitude in his eyes. Keanu nodded politely and replied, "We must never forget that everyone deserves respect." Hearing this short exchange, James realized that Keanu was right. Something had changed in that moment. People were starting to notice each other more. The silence in the store was transforming into a genuine atmosphere of trust. Keanu approached James without drawing attention from the others and gave him an encouraging look. "Keep going, James. Keep doing your job. No one should judge you." James, feeling more at ease, started to speed up his work. The tension in the store had completely dissipated. Customers smiled at James, offering small but meaningful support. Keanu's intervention showed everyone how one person doing the right thing at the right time could make all the difference. Before leaving James's side, Keanu gave him one last encouraging look. The store had started to return to its normal flow, but the tension still lingered in the air. Before stepping out of the store, Keanu glanced around once more and slightly bowed his head. "Showing respect to each other not only makes this world better, but it also connects us all," he murmured. The people left behind were reflecting on Keanu's words, their eyes filled with appreciation and gratitude. James continued working for a while longer, but this time his movements were calmer, more confident. At that moment, the woman was gone, and everyone in the store felt the power of Keanu's actions. People silently exchanged glances, realizing the change had begun within themselves. Eventually, James finished his work and headed to the cash register. The customers around him looked at him, smiling without saying a word. In that moment, for the first time, he felt truly valued. Keanu's help and words had made a huge difference in his world. That day, he had become stronger, not just as a store regular, but as a person. And perhaps most importantly, no one would dare call him slow or inadequate ever again. James sat down on the small bench next to the register. So much had happened that his mind was foggy, but somehow he felt at peace. Keanu's words and the support he had shown erased the fears and hesitations inside him. The reassuring look and encouraging words Keanu had given him felt like a protective shield. Slowly, but this time more determined, he took a deep breath. Meanwhile, some of the customers were talking about the incident among themselves. A few admired what Keanu had done, while others silently exchanged smiles, nodding at each other. The woman's behavior was still fresh in their minds, but James no longer felt the weight of those words. The looks from the people around him gave him strength. Jack, the store manager, approached from behind and extended his hand to James. "The patience and determination you showed today are commendable," he said with a smile. James nodded slightly, thanking him. "Sometimes, all it takes is a little support," he replied. Jack looked at him and said, "We all need to help each other here." A relaxed smile appeared on James's face. At that moment, the woman's anger hadn't subsided. As she slowly began to move away from the register, James glanced at her once more. But this time, there was a determined look in his eyes instead of fear. The woman still looking around, continued to verbally attack the other customers. Taking a deep breath, James began to tidy up the register again. Keanu noticed, out of the corner of his eye, that the woman was moving away and finally headed toward James, who was starting to step away from the register. "You did it," he said. The sincerity in his voice gave James even more confidence. "Everyone was watching you, but you listened to your heart." James nodded proudly. "You helped me," he replied, but this time his voice was firmer and filled with self-assurance. "Remember," Keanu said, "the only thing that slows a person down is the pressure they feel inside, but you're fighting through it." James internalized Keanu's words and continued with his work. This moment had been a turning point, not only for James, but for the entire store. The impact of the woman's words had already faded. The atmosphere inside the store had changed. The more empathetic customers were now paying closer attention to James, eager to offer their help. With Keanu's words giving him courage, James started working faster and more efficiently at the register. His eyes now sparkled with determination. The woman was gone, but her words still hung in the air. Keanu quietly watched James from a corner, paying close attention to every move he made. This simple yet meaningful intervention had completely changed the atmosphere. As customers lined up one by one, they witnessed James making rapid progress. Now, every new customer approaching the register was more patient and respectful towards him. Keanu nodded and stepped a little closer, standing next to James. "The change wasn't just for you, it's for everyone here," he said, his voice full of confidence. When James heard Keanu's words, he looked at him with gratitude. "Thank you," he said, smiling brightly this time. In that moment, all the fears and insecurities from the past had faded, even if just a little. Keanu gave him one last smile as he looked at him. "Just believe in yourself. Everything starts with that." James had found courage in Keanu's final words. Something inside him began to change. His fears were replaced with determination. After Keanu left, James continued his work at the register with more speed and dedication. Customers began to show even more respect for James, who was doing his job efficiently and serving them with patience. Within minutes, James was no longer just an employee doing his duty, but someone who set an example for everyone around him. With the woman gone, the atmosphere at the register had shifted. Some of the customers waiting in line moved a little closer, smiling at James. "Great job," some of them said. As James tidied up the register, he noticed how much deeper his sense of confidence had become. He wasn't as anxious anymore. Keanu's intervention had changed a lot in his life. But one thing remained constant: the strength within him. As James's shift drew to a close, everyone around him began to show their respect and silent support more openly. Whenever a customer approached the register, they behaved with greater patience and respect. All of this change had started with Keanu's intervention, but it continued with the strength James had discovered within himself. At the end of his shift, Keanu watched James one last time before heading out. There was a silent understanding between them. James lifted his head and smiled at Keanu, realizing just how much everything had shifted in such a short time. This wasn't just the story of a single day, it was a life lesson, a moment of transformation. Before leaving, Keanu turned back one last time and looked at James. There was approval in his eyes. "You did it," he said. Those words were some of the strongest James had ever heard in his life. Keanu smiled one final time, and as he walked out the restaurant door, James stood there, head held high, looking ahead with hope for the future.